Clark Gable and Joan Crawford. Really? Well, their affair went on for much longer than anyone would have guessed. But why isn't this common knowledge? Because it was one big, well-kept secret. But here's the kicker. It wasn't just any old affair, you'll see. In fact, it turns out Gable was the one and only for Joan. In this video, I'm about to unveil a shocking truth. Joan Crawford and Clark Gable's affair wasn't just a brief fling. It lasted way longer than anyone could have imagined. But that's not all. We're delving into a passion so perilous it nearly tore apart their careers. Only if you're with me until the end of this video. As a bonus, I'll unravel the unique bond that went beyond mere physical chemistry. It will truly astonish you. But hold on, I've saved the most heart-wrenching part for the grand finale. Only for the strong-hearted. I'll reveal how Joan Crawford became Clark Gable's saviour in the face of an unimaginable tragedy. Get ready for a journey into the biggest pre-Code era affair in Hollywood history. In a magazine back in February 1932, Joan Crawford talked about her rumoured love story with Clark Gable. She said, "People think I'm in love with another actor in Hollywood. Before the camera, we were in love. Now that the picture is over, we are merely good friends." But that wasn't true. During the early 1930s, Joan and Clark did have a passionate love affair. It was so famous that the big bosses at MGM Studios made them stop. But even Hollywood's powerful people couldn't break their strong bond. It lasted for almost 30 years. Later on, when Clark needed help the most, Joan was there for him. In 1968, she admitted, "We had an affair, a wonderful one, and it lasted longer than anyone knows." Hepburn and Tracy, Bogart and Bacall, Crawford and Gable. You don't often hear the last two names mentioned in the same breath as the others. Their partnership may not be as celebrated, because none of the 8 films they starred in together reached classic status. Yet, during the pre-Code era, there was no hotter on-screen couple. Why? Because their passion was undeniably genuine. Back in the 1930s, people loved watching Clark Gable and Joan Crawford together. Even if some of their movies weren't amazing, their chemistry was like fireworks on screen. It made everything else not matter so much. Some people think Clark was Joan Crawford's greatest love. They even say they might have married, or maybe not. But what's for sure is that when they acted together, magic happened on screen. Their special connection lasted for more than 20 years, and they stayed close until Gable passed away in 1960. You might already know that Joan and Clark had an affair, but have you ever wondered why these two? What drew them to each other? Well, okay, you probably get that part. Joan Crawford was a stunning, dazzling actress back then, and Gable, the king of Hollywood, I won't even start on his handsomeness. But physical attraction alone doesn't usually sustain a romance, right? Well, this romance didn't just fizzle out. It turned into a real, long-lasting relationship. I know maybe it's hard to believe, but these two legendary performers had a lot in common. They both came from humble backgrounds and had dysfunctional families, but they rose to stardom in the fantasy world of Hollywood. Gossip magazines couldn't get enough of their private lives. Clark was rumoured to have charmed every one of his co-stars, and Joan was famous for using her allure to get what she wanted. She has slept with every male star at MGM except Lassie, her rival Betty Davis once cheekily remarked. But Joan and Clark were also the marrying type. She had 4 husbands, while he had 5. It's a shame they aren't as famous as other on-screen pairs like Hepburn and Tracy or Rogers and Astaire. Crawford and Gable were just as big. Despite not receiving the recognition, these two legends have left a lasting mark on history. Get ready to bring back some old-school charm with the original on-screen seductive duo, Crawford and Gable. Grab a cold drink because things are about to heat up. I told you I'd show you what made their bond so strong. Want to know the secret? They had more in common than you might think. Let's take a closer look at their lives. Let's unravel those layers of Hollywood together, just like peeling an onion. Joan's life was far from the glamorous tale we know today. Her real birth name, Lucille Fay LeSueur. Her parents, Thomas and Anna, struggled to make ends meet for their family. Tragedy struck early as her father left when she was just months old. Her mother later married Henry J. Cassin, whom Joan believed was her real father for most of her childhood. It was both a blessing and a curse. Desperate to escape her family's painful story, Joan leaped into her first romance. You can clearly see how her tough childhood left a deep mark on her. Now, on the other hand, Clark Gable's entry into the world faced its own challenges. Just 10 months after his birth, a terrible tragedy hit his family. His mother passed away suddenly, leaving the family without a mother figure. It led to a terrible conflict within the family. Clark's father was Protestant, while his mother was Catholic. After her passing, he refused to raise young Clark in the Catholic faith. This infuriated her family, leading to disputes, insisting that the boy spend time with his mother's family. Clark's birth certificate had a mistake, initially labelling him as a girl. This had a big impact on his father, who tried everything to make up for it by pushing young Clark to be a man from a very early age. He wanted his son to be as masculine as possible. Well, maybe he succeeded, because when you think of a masculine image from the Golden Age, I'm pretty sure Clark Gable's name comes to mind. Both Joan and Clark came from simple families and felt insecure about themselves. Crawford first saw Gable while she was on the MGM set, and she had a feeling he'd become a huge star. She hit the bullseye. She even asked for him for their first film together. She specifically asked for him as her leading man. Joan was already a shining star at MGM, the second highest grossing actress after Marie Dressler. She was known for giving advice to other actors. Don't sleep with your co-stars until you've made at least 3 movies together. Well, in Gable's case, she broke her own rule. And she was very much married to fellow actor Douglas Fairbanks Jr., son of Douglas Fairbanks and stepson of Mary Pickford, the reigning couple of silent-era Hollywood. So both professionally and personally, Crawford had powerful connections. Back then, Clark had appeared in 17 films but hadn't made a big splash with audiences. He had just divorced and was about to marry his second wife, Maria Rhea Langham, when he and Joan appeared in a movie together in 1931 called Dance Fools Dance. Joan didn't like the movie much, but there's no denying that Crawford and Gable had remarkable chemistry. They started having a special relationship instantly. Joan, the bigger star, confessed that sparks flew right away. It was like an electric current went through my body. My knees buckled, she confessed. If he hadn't held me by the shoulders, I'd have dropped. Most of their affair happened on the studio lot, with early morning and late night rendezvous in Joan's trailer, a luxury gifted by her oblivious husband. It had been my wedding gift to her, which made the betrayal worse, Douglas lamented. I wasn't quite finished paying for it yet. But Fairbanks wasn't any better, believe me. He chased after Katharine Hepburn, and he had a bunch of other flings. To put it bluntly, they were headed for trouble. Adele Rogers St. John's, a friend of both actors, once caught Clark and Joan in a passionate embrace behind a bandstand. Joan had her legs wrapped around him in a position that only a supple dancer like Joan could assume, as St. John's described. But Crawford didn't mind at all. She just looked up and said, "Adela, hello." Then the next day she sent St. John's flowers and a note that said, "I bet you liked watching." Crawford quickly gained a reputation for her unrestrained sensuality, but it wasn't always in a positive light. When she was in her 30s, Crawford even had a peculiar relationship with the much younger Jackie Cooper. Cooper recalled, "She would bathe me, powder me, cologne me, then she would do it all over again." Did she have similar habits with Gable? Everyone at MGM, especially Louis B. Mayer, noticed the spark and was eager to pair them up for another film. Laughing Sinners was already in production, and Mayer promptly axed Johnny Mac Brown to replace him with Gable. Their chemistry ignited, and Laughing Sinners became a hit. But it was in their next film that on-screen magic would truly explode. Now you might be wondering, what's the fuss? Isn't it common for married actors to have secret affairs? Well, you're not entirely off base. Their affair was different. Crawford and Gable co-starred in a third movie that same year, Possessed. This film truly captured the intense attraction between them, and by then they were deeply involved in a real-life affair. It was arguably one of Joan's best movies of the 1930s. She sported a fresh look with a new hairstyle and makeup, which added to her stunning appearance. Their affair was passionate, filled with secret getaways and heated moments. Possessed went on to become one of their most successful collaborations. There's a scene in the film where Joan sings a song to Gable called "How Long Will It Last?" The song choice felt rather ironic, don't you think? It seemed like she meant every word of it. But their affair caused a lot of trouble. As news of their illicit romance spread, Louis B. Mayer, the head of MGM, became concerned, because both John and Clark were married to other people. We all know Hollywood studios would do anything to safeguard their cash cows, even if it meant getting down and dirty, all in the name of making a buck. If you want to dive deeper into how power played out during the Golden Age, hit that corner link to watch my video. But save it for later, after you've seen this one through. Hold tight, because I'm about to drive home the point. In his desperate attempt, Mayer even tried to send Joan and her husband on a long honeymoon to stop the affair, but it didn't work. He even went as far as threatening to fire both of them if they didn't stop the affair. He encouraged Clark, who was less famous at the time, to be seen publicly with his wife. But photographers still caught them double dating and leaving their spouses behind. Furious about the situation, Mayer removed Clark from Joan's movie, Letty Linton, and replaced him with another actor. Joan wanted Gable to star alongside her in the film, but Mayer refused. The boss said no at first because he thought their affair would hurt Joan's career. Eventually he agreed because he knew they made a lot of money together. The public was hungry for another Crawford-Gable combo, and Mayer gave in. The movie company had rules about actors' behaviour, and these rules made Joan and Clark end their romance. Crawford also did her best to cool down rumours of their affair. "I really should have had property of MGM tattooed on my expletive," she would later say of the studio's management of her personal life. Even though they weren't as public about their relationship, they stayed close, even during Clark's marriage and his rise to stardom. Joan later revealed that their affair had lasted much longer than the public knew. What was going on between them? It was really serious. It is rumoured that the two talked about marriage, but they never married for several reasons. They thought it might not work out. Joan didn't see Clark as someone to marry. She thought of him more as a lover and friend. She had worries about his possible unfaithfulness in marriage. "I didn't think Clark would make a good husband, a great lover, a fine friend, but I imagined him an unfaithful husband," she said. They both had complicated marriages before and didn't want to make more commitments. They realised they were too much alike. They decided to stay close friends, but don't think that's the end of it. Joan's marriage to Douglas ended in 1933. In their next movie, Dancing Lady, Joan had a new boyfriend, Franco Tone, but she was still working with Clark. Even this time, when Joan had cooled things off with Gable, people wondered if Franco could replace Clark in her heart. Tone was different from the men she had been with before. He was educated and mature, introducing her to new and exciting experiences. Joan was romantically involved with both Tone and Gable during the filming. Nothing quite like it, huh? Joan sure knew how to live life to the fullest. Well, not entirely. You've likely noticed that in the lives of great legends, disaster strikes just when things seem to be going well. This time was no different. She faced several miscarriages that led to speculation about their causes, including the big question, who is the father? There were a couple of options: ex-husband Fairbanks Jr., boyfriend Tone, or possibly Gable. That's a legitimate question, I must admit. People wondered why Joan couldn't have kids. Some thought it was because she had many abortions. Some people think that having a child with Gable would have been a great idea. What are your thoughts? I can't wait to read your comments. Can you imagine a child with Joan's beauty and Clark's handsome looks? At first, Joan was unsure about taking a role in Dancing Lady, but she had a change of heart after Jean Harlow was suggested as a replacement. The film went on to become a blockbuster for MGM. Their magnetic chemistry continued in Chained. Although Joan had cooled her relationship with Gable, her love for him remained. Even as she prepared to marry Franco Tone, Joan also starred in Forsaking All Others with Gable just before her marriage. Joan couldn't help but wonder if Tone could truly fill the void left by Gable. She said, "I thought he liked to live in the moment, to be free of responsibilities. Then along came Carole Lombard." Carole Lombard was famous for her romantic comedies. They appeared together in the movie No Man of Her Own, but their love story truly took off when they bumped into each other at a Beverly Hills ball 4 years later. Carole became the love of Clark's life. They couldn't stand to be apart for more than 6 days. Clark, who had been linked with many ladies, put it this way: "I've been known to like ladies, and I do. With her it's different. Everything about her is different than with any other gal." In 1939 they tied the knot after Clark divorced his previous wife, Maria Langham. Joan and Clark's on-screen chemistry had always sizzled, but by the time they worked on their 8th and final film together, Strange Cargo, things had changed. Crawford, feeling envious of Clark's new love and his success during the Gone with the Wind era, allegedly whispered hurtful things to him on set, causing him to storm off. Crawford and Gable made 6 movies together, all of which were big hits. Despite comedies not being Crawford's strong suit, their films raked in a lot of money. Time magazine even crowned Joan the queen of the movies. But this success fueled jealousy in her husband, Tone, and it began causing issues in their marriage. All she could see was Gable's career soaring higher with his newfound love, a love that appeared even stronger than theirs. Crawford's time as the Queen of Hollywood was ending, and people thought her movies weren't doing well anymore. Gable, on the other hand, was doing great. He snagged the role of a lifetime in Gone with the Wind. It was supposed to be for Crawford too, but Joan didn't really try to get that role. She wanted to be in another movie called The Women. Both of these movies became super popular. Later on, MGM decided to put them back together in one more movie. It had been 4 years since they worked together, and now Gable was a bigger star. They had a little argument about who should get their name on the movie first, but they both did a great job. This movie showed a different side of Joan, with all the fancy clothes and makeup, and she did really well. They stayed friends, and Gable loved his wife, Carole Lombard, a lot. And now comes the part where you might want to grab a tissue, because you're bound to get a little teary-eyed. Despite their on-set tension, it was Crawford whom Clark turned to when tragedy struck. Carole Lombard tragically died in a plane crash on January 12, 1942, during a tour to promote war bonds. Not even 3 years into their marriage. Gable was heartbroken. He talked to Joan a lot for comfort, and Crawford provided that comfort, recalling, "I just held him. He was drunk, he had to get drunk, and he cried like a baby, as though his life had ended, and maybe, in a way, it had." Gable had a hard time after that and didn't do so well in his career. Crawford stepped in to replace Lombard in Clark's next film. They all kissed the bride. She donated her entire salary of $128,000 to the Red Cross, which had located Lombard's body after the crash. There have been whispers that Joan popped the question to Clark, but he chose to enlist in the army as a tribute to Carole instead. The grief-stricken Clark Gable joined the Army Air Force, reportedly with a death wish. Despite surviving World War II and eventually remarrying, he continued to mourn Lombard until his death from a heart attack in 1960. Crawford revealed, "When he died, I was so stunned I couldn't even cry. All I could do was remember the good times we'd had together." She admitted that even her last husband, Pepsi-Cola CEO Alfred Steele, couldn't replace Gable's special place in her heart. "I still wonder what would have happened if we'd married, but I'm glad we didn't," she said. "What we had between us was so special. When he went, a part of me did too, and as much as I loved Alfred, that part of me was never revived." When someone asked Joan about the love of her life, she said, "Clark Gable was the only man I ever loved. Our relationship was private, just between us." This was the story of Hollywood's real royalty. They lit up the screen together in 8 movies, all at Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. These two were the brightest among all the stars in the sky. And one thing becomes crystal clear. Their connection went way beyond the glitz and glamour of Hollywood. They weren't just silver screen icons. They were genuine, passionate individuals who shared something profound. But it's during life's toughest moments that we witness the true depth of a relationship. Joan Crawford, once Clark's lover, became his most trusted companion when he was shattered into a million pieces. She was there to pick him up when he hit rock bottom, showing that sometimes love takes on a different form, one of unwavering support and friendship. So keep in mind, behind the dazzling facade of Hollywood legends are real people with intricate lives and genuine feelings. The Clark Gable and Joan Crawford you've learned about today aren't merely characters on screen. They are individuals who shared an extraordinary connection, filled with respect, passion, and honesty. But don't think you can just walk away. You're not going anywhere because I've already got the next video ready for you, and there's no time to waste. Why were Carole Lombard's scandals kept under wraps? Click now.